Okay. All right. Welcome everyone. We were chatting. Janice and I were chatting before we got on, and I was admitting how much of a long day it has been, right? And a long week. And I'm sure that we are all feeling it because it's that time of year at the end of the year, end of fourth quarter, end of the fiscal year for many of us, end of the calendar year. We're all excited about the actual holidays, but they're not quite here yet. And we are feeling the effects of working hard, even if we're working smartly for 306 whatever 350 something days at this point in time, and so that is kind of the motivation for today's podcast, right? You're maybe feeling excited about the holidays coming up, or you may be feeling burnt out. You may be feeling looking forward to taking vacation over the holidays and or starting the new year, but still feeling like you're carrying a lot of weight, whether it's at home or at work or the combination of the two. And so today we are going to be talking about burnout in particular and how it shows up for us as introverts. And not only that, we're also going to talk a little bit about work addiction, which many of us don't necessarily talk about, but it is related to burnout. And we're also probably going to talk about a tip or two or three that if you are experiencing burnout, or someone in your workplace, or someone in your family, that might help you kind of turn things around before the end of the year. So with that said, we're going to kick off with just a couple of introductions because you may be new to me or you may be new to Janice or the both of us. So Janice, would you like to go first and just say who you are, what you do, what you're all about?
Sure. So my name is Janice.
Before we do that, I'm sorry. Drinks. Okay, so if you're new to my sessions, I am big on drinks. Now, sometimes it's an alcoholic beverage, sometimes it is not. But every time I will ask what you're drinking and why you're drinking what you're drinking, because there's always a story behind it. So, Janice, before you introduce yourself, what are you drinking this evening?
Okay, and this is when the camera's going to mess up. Okay, this evening I am drinking a Capri Sun.
We can see it.
And it is fruit punch flavored because somehow I messed up not getting Pacific Punch or Rush or whatever it was. Why am I drinking a Capri Sun? So it's one of those things that can be in the fridge or the freezer, depending on which season it is, that I can grab really quickly in between meetings. And gives me a little bit burst of sugar, feels slightly healthier than like juice or soda, and slightly up from water, and I can finish it all. The aim is to finish it all in one go before the meeting starts, but it brings me a tiny bit of joy. That's kind of it.
Love it. I love it. And I love it because Capri Suns remind me of youthfulness. Like I remember growing up with Capri Suns, so I love that it brings you joy. Okay. I am drinking in my, you probably can't see it, but it's like a happy mug. Happy. This is actually my mother's mug. I am talking to you guys from my mom's house versus my house, but I'm drinking hot green tea with honey because I'm in New York and it's cold as heck outside right now. And I just came back in from a walk, which I thought would rejuvenate me, but it just made me very cold. So I came back in, got some hot tea and honey, which West Indian heritage, anything related to hot tea and the British and all of that stuff. So that's what I'm drinking. Okay.
And the weather's only going to get worse over these next few days.
Only going to get worse, but that's okay. We'll deal with it. Okay. Please, now, Janice, introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. So my name is Janice Chaka. Very easy to find. I'm the only one on the internet, on LinkedIn, on Google. Luckily, I'm old enough that there's nothing on there that shouldn't be on there. So I'm giving away a bit, but yeah, I'm old enough that that's okay. So I am an introvert success strategist, I guess we're going to call it, the name changes occasionally, but I basically help introverts who are burnt out and overwhelmed and tired of feeling that they have to act like an extrovert to be successful or run a business, and who would like to achieve greatness in whatever way works for them, be it a business or their career, and help them build that in a way that works for them and their introversion. And it can be through a range of, and I do that through one-on-one coaching, I do group coaching, I have tools that I create to help people, as well as courses. I run a podcast, I have a book, like multimedia. Let's call it multimedia in
Yeah.
that way. But I also work with organizations to build that, bridge that gap between introvert and extrovert communication, what that looks like in teams, what that looks like for leadership, because we all work with introverts, we all work with extroverts. And if we don't build that muscle and have that very clear, defined way of how we're going to communicate as a team, as an organization, everything else is a moot point. But with that, productivity rises and everything's all good. But that is a small nutshell of some of the things that I do, as well as public speaking, keynotes, and all that fun stuff.
Very nice. Very nice. And while you were saying it, it just dawned on me. If you are listening, if you're here live with us, or if you're listening to the replay, drop in the chat whether you are an introvert or an extrovert or a combination of both, which we call ambiverts, right? Most of us have some combination of both inside of us, right? It's a spectrum. And so, but you might identify with one more strongly with one or the other. Just let you know, both Janice and myself are introverts, but we love and have heart for all, right? So if you're extrovert or ambivert or an introvert, you are welcome here. Okay. Okay, so Janice introduced herself. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Nicole Bryan. I am a executive career strategist, specifically helping introverted women become the best leaders that they can possibly be. And that is not always easy as they navigate the social and political and economic and inside organizations, right? The networking, the office politics, all of that stuff. And so I help them become the best leaders that they can possibly be. And if they have a career goal of becoming a senior leader or a executive leader in their organization, I help them to get promoted to that level as well. It is my true honor and privilege because introverts, we have so much to offer to the world, frankly. Listen, 50% of the world are introverts. We're just not loud about it, or as loud as our extroverted counterparts sometimes. But we are making inroads and we are making impact. And part of my mission is to make sure the entire world knows that. So that's what I do. And when I saw Janice and what she was all about, I was like, listen, we got to get together. We have to have a conversation about burnout and about work addiction, and to kind of kick that off, particularly as it relates to introverts. It's always very interesting to talk about topics that are very common, but from an introverted lens. So that's what we're going to do today. All right. So where shall we start? Where would you like to start?
So it's okay, burnout. And I think one of the reasons this came up is because we were talking about the end of the year, everyone's experiencing burnout. And this past 2 years, it's been my most popular talk has been burnout and imposter syndrome in the workplace, because it's a silent killer, because no one talks about it. And so this is why we should talk about it. But what you were saying was from an introvert point of view. But before that, I'm going to ask you, what does work addiction mean to you?
Ooh, okay. So this work addiction is, first of all, people, you will hear the term, I'm sure we've all heard the term at some point in time about being a workaholic. And usually people will say it in a bragging way, right? Like, yeah, I'm a workaholic. I work a lot, right? That's the common definition. But what many people don't realize is that work addiction is actually a true addiction. It's a behavioral addiction, like gambling, like sex addiction, right? And so, because most of the Western world has glorified work, it is common for people to talk about it in a very positive way. But what we don't recognize is that true work addiction has so many uh, downsides, so many issues, challenges, not just for the person who might be a work addict, but for everyone they touch, the relationships that they have, right? And so I happen to be a recovering work addict, right? I was addicted to work probably for most of my late 20s into my 30s, probably to my mid 30s. But I also became a psychologist to help people who are work addicts. So it was at a time where people were not studying work addiction. It was a very new phenomenon. And I had the opportunity to be one of the first to kind of research it, develop a diagnostic tool for it, and recover from it, frankly. So in today's society, work addiction is taken much more seriously, and it does have a lot of overlap with burnout. But you can identify yourself as a work addict if not just working a lot of hours, but that you can't control it, you can't stop it. You Sometimes you don't even want to stop it. People around you might be asking you to work less, and you might intend to work less, but you can't, right? And so, and it's not only just like physically doing work or physically being in the office. It's when you are with your loved ones, but you're thinking about work. You're not present in the moment. Or, you might be at your child's basketball game and you're constantly on your phone. You can't, and responding to emails or checking to see if emails have come in. It could be that you are not necessarily concerned about working for money per se, but you are just so driven that you are not able to slow down even when you know you need to. You may be having health signs that you need to slow down, or people are giving you feedback that you need to slow down, but you're not able to, right? It's a lack of control, despite intellectually knowing that you need to do something different. You can't shift your behaviors as a result. And then there's always, like I said, all these negative consequences, physical, financial, all the things. So that is a long explanation, but that's what work addiction is. And it's very, very prevalent, particularly in our westernized countries.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because hustle culture. And
exactly.
and even if it could be from a job, but it could be if you have your own business. It's very hard to switch off if you have your own business.
Exactly, exactly. And one of the key things is because most people are like, well, yes, I work a lot because my company demands it. That is a differentiator, right? So if your environment is dictating it, and you are working a lot because whatever, people keep asking you to get on a schedule, or excuse me, you have like a big project coming, a big project, and you kind of want to lean into that project. That is situational. That's not work addiction. That's in the moment you are shifting your behavior to address this one thing. The difference when you are a work addict is that it's coming from inside you. So no matter what the environment is asking you, and you know this because every job you go to, you're working 70 hours a week, even when the job is not requiring it, right? So it's you are the common factor there. And the other thing to know is, like I said, when the situation changes, the big project ends, or you get a new boss or whatever, you're still going as if, right, the situation is demanding it, and it's not. So it's that when you can think of see yourself as the common denominator, it's an intrinsic versus an extrinsic situation.
Motivation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I'm like, do I? Not sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Because a lot of it, I'm sure, yes, some of it might be tied in with like money worries or showing up at work and being visible, or because of the comparison that happens at work.
Mhm.
when you have your performance reviews, well, this person and this person were not treated as individuals.
Yep.
That's a whole other topic of conversation.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
But with burnout, especially with introverts, burnouts, some of this, what it looks like from an introvert point of view, tends to be when an introvert's daily or regular routine is shifted. And this time of the year is perfect for this, because you got into a groove, say September, October, and then if you're in the States, Thanksgiving happened, so that puts you off kilter. You got more social stuff going on. And then at this time of year, there's more social things, family things. You don't get enough time to take that breath and to recharge. And so when your natural rhythm is disrupted for extended periods of time, because you don't get that time to recharge, because you don't get that time to be alone, it can lead to a burnout in an introvert in a way that it wouldn't look like the same for an extrovert. For an extrovert, it's more like they suffer burnout when their work and personal relationships are stressed, maybe, or hampered, and they don't get that extra social time. Like during COVID, a lot of extroverts were just it was a type of burnout, but they didn't realize it. They just thought they needed that social interaction, but it was because stuff wasn't the way that they needed it for them to keep their energy up, right? And so for introverts, it can be really hard because, well, again, it's just this period of time. This will happen and that will happen. And I'm sure it's possibly the same with work addiction. It takes so much longer to get out of it than it did to get in it.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
your week vacation between Christmas and New Year's, because work is off, is not going to be enough to fix it.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think with work addiction in particular, introverts tend to be more susceptible to work addiction, primarily because as introverts, many of us we are the put our heads down, kind of get work done, prefer to work. We love working as part of teams, but we really enjoy working solo and then bringing what our results to the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you can imagine you can get really addicted to work if you're like really zeroed in. And that's our strength, right? As introverts, that's one of our strengths. We will focus in, we will solve a problem, we will deliver results. And it excites us. Like we reward our own selves, frankly, by those behaviors. So you can imagine if you do that over and over and over again, it's kind of a thrill that you constantly are seeking, right? And you're revalidating yourself. Half of us don't even need anybody else to validate us. Like we're jacked up on our own excitement of just doing the work. And so, yeah, it's really easy. It's easier for introverts to become work addicted just because of the way we enjoy our solo time and we focus in on the work. And it's gratifying for us. And so many of us won't look elsewhere for gratification or, anything different. Yeah.
And from the sounds of it, I think you can have work addiction and not be burnt out because you are getting that extra energy.
That's exactly right.
Dopamine hit, you are cool with it. Yes,
Janice, that is exactly right. And that's what happened. That's what happened to me. That's what has happened to many of my clients, where you are so addicted to the work, right? You are juiced up. It feels like you are very energized, and you keep going, you go and going. But what will happen is you will eventually either hit a wall yourself in terms of energy. Like people can go years, right? But then they will either hit a wall, or the environment around them will make them stop. Meaning they like the many work addicts, for example, their romantic relationships suffer. They get divorced. They have high divorce rate, high separation rate, all of that stuff, right? That's a very common consequence of being work addicted. Or even, believe it or not, you would think that companies would be like, yeah, bring me the work addicts because they're going to deliver for me. But even in those situations, work addicts will isolate themselves from their teams. So many people don't like working with work addicts because work addicts will either hoard the work, right? Or they will not collaborate well when it's time to collaborate. So
Mm-hmm.
even those relationships get strained. So one way or the other, you either eventually hit a burnout mode or hit a wall where where you don't keep progressing, or people around you get tired of it and their tolerance for the way you are behaving
Mm-hmm.
is it gets very, very low. So yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon, honestly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think with burnout, what happens is it, not saying it's different, it creeps up on you. So, we all start with that. We want to prove ourselves. You get a new job, you get a new position, you want to prove yourself. And
Yeah.
that's fine, as long as it's for a certain period of time. But if it is a long, sustained period of time, and then you keep working harder to achieve things, and then you start to neglect yourself, you're not taking as much time off, you are not setting boundaries,
Mhm.
you and then you start to get short-tempered. Maybe there's lack of sleep. There's some insomnia in there. You start getting snippy with people. Stuff happens, and you're like, "It's not my fault." Such and such. The blaming culture of like, it's someone else's fault. It's someone else's issue. It's not me.
Yeah.
And then along with that, sort of, you find your values changing, and what you wouldn't put up with previously, you will, because,
Mhm.
well, like, I just need to keep going and get these things, and you deny all these problems. And part of that ends up, because you're so buried in work, um, you sort of start to isolate yourself from family and friends. And as introverts, there's levels, but you might start to do that, and then your behavior changes with that. And then other people start to notice. Other people might comment on it. Could be at work that comments on it, could be personal that comments on it. And then there's that level that you get to where you're almost looking at yourself like an out of body experience, where you're like, "Hey, I know I'm working too hard, but I just don't feel like myself. Something's a little off, but I don't know what it is," because you don't recognize it in yourself. You're just
Mhm.
like, "I just feel a little off. Maybe it's this project. Maybe it will change after. It will change after. It will change after." It doesn't change. You just keep on doing the same thing. And then there's that stage where you're just like, I just need to drink, or there's substance abuse that happens.
Mhm.
Drinking or weed, or an out of control Lego addiction, whatever it is, to kind of try and balance the miserableness that you are feeling in your life,
Yeah.
but you don't realize that that's what's going on. And then you might feel depressed, lost, exhausted. And the sort of the last stage, because there's like 12 stages of burnout, and the very
Yeah.
last stage is you mentally and physically collapse. And I know someone that's happened to, and it wasn't like, oh, they had bad health. It was, they used to swim with sharks. They used to do marathon running. They used to do the biggest, baddest human known to man. And
Yeah.
then one day they couldn't get out of bed. So the body was like, I'm done ringing that bell. We're done here. And they were lucky that they had a support system that could help them pay their bills and could help them
Yeah.
get fed and get through life. But not everyone has that luxury.
Yeah. Yeah.
And figuring out those signs and what you can change to make it better, hopefully, because some things are definitely extrinsic and out of your control, but how you deal with it and how you set boundaries and how you um, and reinforce those boundaries, because it's all well and good to be like, yes, I'm going to set boundaries, and then you keep stepping
Mhm.
back because you don't want to upset anyone or the apple cart or the culture that you work in. But it has a serious consequences the longer you let it go, and it looks different to everybody. Just because someone has a certain level of work and they're not burnt out doesn't mean that you would have a certain level of work and not burn out from it. And I think people get, because we're so used to comparing ourselves and each other because of social media and because of performance reviews and because of the
Yeah.
way the structures are set up in society, it's really easy to be like, well, I did such and such, so, and I'm not burnt out, so why is this person suffering? They should just suck it up. And
Mhm.
that's not how it works, because we all have different capacities for different things and work in different ways. And I'm kind of, yeah, I could soapbox about being sick and tired of everyone being treated like the same way, but we're so different. But
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
the time, people don't know enough about themselves. They haven't had the time to do the work to know about themselves and figure stuff out and get things wrong and be like, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that, but this works better for me. And
Hmm.
things change over time, to know when to set those boundaries and what that looks like and what is obtainable and what you can do for a certain period of time before like that's a little too much. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, you said so many good things, but as you were talking, I was thinking about, okay, I think we've talked about and identified maybe how, if someone's like, you know what, I think I am burned out, like to your point, something's off. They're probably not using the word burnout per se, and maybe not totally aware that they may be burning out or they're in one of the phases or stages of burnout,
Mm-hmm.
but they know something is off. How do you advise them to, like, if someone's like, maybe I am burning out because what's happening with me, this is different than anything I've ever experienced before. How do you advise someone, or how do you help someone even identify whether they are in any of the stages of burnout?
So you could do a weekly check-in practice. So this is something that I work with some people. Every Friday, Monday, pick a day. And have you been feeling physically, how have you been feeling physically and mentally this week? And you could do it between 1 and 5, good, bad, whatever, whichever scale works quickly for you.
Mm,
But just a really quick off the cuff. I've been feeling good, bad, meh, whatever it might be. And then the next question is, how short-tempered have you been over the
mm,
past week? And I mean, sometimes there's reasons like, oh, I didn't get enough sleep, blah, 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 blah. But how short-tempered and irritable have you been? And then go ahead and add something restorative to your calendar. Because that's the one thing we don't do enough of is we're happy to add meetings to our calendars and projects to our calendars and go and do things, but something restorative to you, to your calendar, we very rarely do and commit to and stick to. We very
mhm.
rarely do. A lot
Yeah.
of us will be like, oh, I don't want back-to-back meetings. And yet suddenly we have back-to-back meetings and we won't honor the fact that we want to stop at this time so I can go to the restroom. I mean, what
Yeah.
I was saying with like getting a drink is like, so sometimes you just have enough time to like swipe something and keep on running.
Yeah.
And so making sure you put that in your calendar and then review previous weeks to see if there's any patterns. So maybe it really is just this week is a bad week. But if you look back for 8 weeks and it's like, oh, actually, I've been short-tempered, irritable, and not feeling good for 8 weeks,
Yeah.
then you might want to reevaluate. Are you sleeping? Are you hydrating? Are you eating? And then what else that might look like and how you're feeling mentally as well as physically.
Okay.
Really quickly. It
Those
doesn't
are
cover
good.
everything, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are really, really good. Okay. Um, is there a way, we talked a little bit about this, and I know I talked about it in terms of work addiction. From your perspective, how does burnout show up different? How might burnout show up differently if you are an introvert versus an ambivert, or does it?
It maybe not how it shows up, but what causes it is different,
Okay.
is what I would say.
Okay.
Um, so how it shows up, I think generally burnout is just the same, but
Okay.
what could cause it?
I love
For
it. Yeah. Yeah.
for example, October, I knew I had 5 speaking events in 3 different cities, and I was going to be traveling a bunch and helping my partner with live events. And
Okay.
so,
I'm already exhausted thinking and just hearing
right,
that
right,
list.
right.
Yes.
But
Okay.
the live events, I'm all cool with. I love live events. Get me in person anywhere, and that energizes me.
Okay.
As long as I'm not sort of doing, if I'm facilitating and I'm working with humans, there's a difference. Whereas if I am doing customer service work, for example, that I would do for my partner's business, it's a little bit, because it's not my business. I'm not talking about stuff that I'm into. I'm like, I don't know, ask the boss. I got a clue.
Right.
But then making sure that my November, I had a break. I literally went away, sat on a beach for 2 days and didn't talk to anyone.
Yeah.
But I knew, but I would get brain fog. I'd forget things. I'd be halfway through a conversation and be like, that word, and to be fair, women of a certain age, that could be a mixture of menopause, premenopause, or just burnout. Just saying. It's really hard to know. You're like, and all of the above.
Yeah.
And that also does not get talked about enough, and how you're supposed to be a leader and do all these things while your body is fighting you every step of the way.
Right. While you're dripping buckets, sweating buckets because you're having a hot flash in the middle
Yeah.
of a executive presentation.
And your brain's like, no, not feeling it today, not doing it.
Right.
And so knowing my routine and still working on it, knowing what works for me. I know, like, when I used to work in an office, I was a recruiter for a really long time. My background is in HR. I used to nap in my best friend's car at lunchtime. I didn't know I was an introvert back then, but looking back, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of a sign.
Yeah.
But from a burnout perspective, it's a case of, if you are not getting that regular time to recharge or decompress in whatever way works for you, it could be reading a book, it could be coloring, it could be doing Lego, it could be just sitting and screaming into the void, whatever it might be. If you're not getting that on a regular basis and it's not baked into your habits and what you do and your calendar, some people are run by their calendars, some people are run by their to-do list, whatever situation, Monday, like whatever project management system you use for your life, and it's not baked in there to recharge, that's where the problems start, because that's the core of what will help an introvert be successful in no matter what they do.
Yeah. I am I'm like, yeah. So, one of the things that I started doing, and I felt myself, I've been working on a project and with an organization, and my time they've needed more of my time for several different reasons, much more of my time than I contracted to do.
Oh, that happens.
And it's the end of the year, they need the time. I get it, right? There's a solid business reason why, but I found my stress levels going higher than I normally like to feel. It took me way back to like the beginning of my career, where I was like stressed all the time. So I had a reminder of that. I also just didn't have enough time in the day anymore to do anything, right? And one of the things that I started doing was to help me kind of, so I was once again back to back meetings from like 8 a.m. to like 7 p.m. I was again taking me way back into my earlier career. And then I was like, you know what? I'm about to lose it. I'm about to lose my freaking mind if I don't create some type of space here to regroup. And so what I started doing was, my hour meetings, I was like, we got to cut it off at like 45 minutes, right? Like the least we're going to do is cut it off at 45 minutes at first. And that's what I did, to create that 15-minute space between meetings where I could get up and walk around, or I could actually just put my head on my desk, or whatever I needed to do, grab my hot tea, whatever I needed to do, but just give me a break from speaking, give me a little bit of time for my mind to recharge, right? So the introvert in me was like screaming, save myself, save yourself, right? So that was one thing that I did. Then I did it, and it actually started to work, but it wasn't enough. It was like the work kept coming at me, and I was like, you need more time. And so I started to block off my calendar at the beginning. My brain works best early in the morning, right? And so I blocked my calendar off in the morning so that nobody could make any appointments with me, so that I could have that as my work time, head down project time.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped me, right? So it didn't automatically click to me that I'm like, Nicole, you need to create space. But once I felt the pressure, I was like, you're not going to make it to the end of this year if you don't create the space that you need to do exactly what you. Yeah. It's the honor it part. That's the hard part, right? Because we all have good intentions. We're going to block our calendar. And then the minute someone's like, but could you meet so-and-so? I'm like, yeah, okay, we could do that. And then it's all good intentions, but you start crashing. Yeah. So you're self-sacrificing essentially in that regard.
Yeah, you have to honor it. And I've definitely worked in organizations where even if you do block off your calendar, someone will just slap a meeting on there anyway. And this is one of the reasons I do work with organizations on sort of having a communication strategy. And part of that is, does it have to be a meeting? There are
Right.
ways to do
Exactly. Yeah.
that. But if it is a meeting, like, really, does every meeting have to be an hour? Obviously not. Is there a goal? Is there a goal for the meeting? Who actually has to be there? And it should be one goal for the meeting, not like 18,000.
Correct.
And could it be asynchronous? Could it be recorded? Like, all of these things that will make life so much easier for like everybody. It doesn't have to be a meeting. And there's been organizations that did no meeting Monday and no meeting Friday, and then
Yeah.
it slides. It's like, well, but this
Totally.
meeting and the town hall thing, and so they don't respect the boundaries that they're trying to put on themselves. And it's really hard for us to do that for some unbeknown reason. But another thing is sort of, the work's always going to be there. No matter what happens,
Yeah.
what job you do, the work is always going to be there.
Yeah.
So actually signing off, having a shutdown sequence, just like your computer does, of to tell your mind we are not talking or thinking about work anymore. So it could be just double checking my calendar for the next day, or making a note of the top 3 things I have to do the next day. And then once you do these 1, 2, 3 steps, close the computer, laptop, whatever it is that you have, and then that's it until you start again in the morning. And then you should have a boot up sequence. So your brain goes, oh yeah, we're going to start work now. What that looks like, apart from opening your computer, it could be getting your favorite mug with your tea or whatever it might be. Some people like walk around the block if you don't commute, like something that signifies to your brain, okay, now we're going to start working again. And then these are the top 3 things. Maybe some emails came in overnight and you've got to rearrange a little bit and what the rest of your week looks like. But having a boot up and a shutdown sequence is very helpful to bookend work and for your brain to realize that, oh, I can start working and thinking about work now. And, oh, I should not be doing that anymore. And we're going to stop. Those are 2 things that are really, really helpful. And the stricter you can be about that, because yes, stuff happens, but the stricter you can be about that. And if you need some external accountability on that, because we only have a certain amount of willpower in us in any given day. So if you need external help for that, be it AI where your system shuts down and then you're locked out, or that you have a person that you message and you're like, I finished now. And they're like, good job. Whatever it is that you need, and figuring out what you need to help you stay accountable will help long term. But definitely setting yourself up for making sure you have that space. And then you as a leader, letting people know that's what you're doing, so they feel they give themselves the permission to be able to go and do that too. Because that's the other thing. So many people are so scared of doing this because, well, my boss is going to know that I just blocked that time for me. That they need that external validation. Like, it's okay for you to do this. I am not going to be on Slack or Teams or whatever it is for the next hour because I am working on, doesn't matter, because I am working. Punto. That's it. And walking the walk so other people can walk behind you.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking about, so I find myself in a position where, as a people leader, I am having to model or hold my team members accountable for not burning themselves out. Now, I would love to say that it's altruistic. It's not, right? Like, I know that as a people manager, I need my team members to be at their peak. And if being at their peak means that they need to be taking advantage of when they are not at work, I will enforce that, right? So just being 100% completely honest. I care about them as people, yes. I also care about them as employees. And on both sides, they need to not always be working or thinking about work, right? But as you were saying that, it reminded me of a story where you were talking about, most of us need others to help us be accountable, to hold ourselves accountable. I am constantly with my team members, not necessarily making them take time off. They will take the time off, but they will still be logging into work, or right. And so the last time my team member, she was going to she was going to see Taylor Swift in Canada with her sister, and I was like, if I see any emails from you, and this is a person who works all the time, right? And this is one time where she was like, I've never done this. I'm going to go away with my sister. And I could tell she was losing her mind she was just on the verge of burning herself out. And I was like, do not log in. And if you log in, there will be hell to pay, right? Like literally, if you log in when you come back, we're going to have a serious conversation, right? Um, but that was the type of thing that I had to do. Otherwise, she would have been checking email the entire time that she was there. Now, she may have checked email, but she didn't respond because I was looking in her email. I was in her email, right? I was like, you can't, don't do it. So she may have been checking email. She said she didn't, but I know for sure she didn't respond. And that type of, not all bosses are like that, right? Some bosses will take advantage of the fact that you like to work. But one thing I think, and if there are any leaders listening here today and listening in the replay, part of our responsibilities as leaders is making sure that our team members are good, like making sure our team members stay as healthy as they can possibly be. When our team members can't do the boundaries for themselves, I personally think it's part of our responsibilities as human beings, as well as leaders, to help our team members enforce boundaries, particularly if they work in an environment that is constantly pulling them, right? So yeah, you said that, and I was like, yeah, that accountability piece is hard. It's hard enough to be accountable to ourselves or for ourselves, but when we are working with other people and we see that stuff happening, I think part of our responsibility as just human beings is to call that out for sure.
And part of that has changed because of like bring your own device to work, and so people now have their emails on their work emails on their phone.
Yes.
I have personally gotten IT involved when it's like, this person's on vacation, so you just need to cut off their access for the next 7 days. They don't need access. We can have their access, but also I think part of it is everyone's being asked to do more with less, and that's an issue in itself.
Yeah.
And succession planning. People are very scared of leaving for various reasons. One, if someone else does my job, then like I might not have a job to come back to because the organization has not made them feel safe and secure.
Yeah.
Two, there's no cross training, so someone can't do your job because it doesn't even have to be vacation. Something could just happen to you on the way home.
Correct. Yeah.
And that everything documentation doesn't happen because people don't have time. They're doing all these other things to be intentional about like what happens. And yet years ago, we used to have jobs and go on vacation with no internet, and it was fine. But yes, there's a lot of layers to that, from not being able to keep ourselves accountable to external pressures, to what ifs that we all think about, to the way organizations are run, money, the job environment right now. It's a multitude of things. It's never just one thing. But yes, being a leader and modeling that I'm going on vacation, I'm not taking my phone, I'm not taking my work laptop, you cannot reach me unless the place really burns down or something happens. Like, you do not need to reach me.
Yeah.
Such and such is in charge, or like has all the things, and this is what's happening, and everyone knew in advance that all the projects that I was going on vacation, and it is fine, and we worked around it in advance. We're good. But it's very hard to do that if your organization doesn't allow for that, or even model it. If the CEO is always on, then like it makes it very hard for everyone else.
Yeah. We have one question, so I know we're probably going to wrap up in a few, but we do have a question, and Olivia is asking, do you think it's harder for people to recognize burnout in introverts due to the fact that they're already quiet and not as social?
I kind of almost want clarification that, is it harder for introverts to recognize that they are burning out, or is it harder for other people looking in to assume that someone is burning out? I'm kind of curious which way around that is. I'm going to try and answer both. So
I think it's the not the former. I think it's the latter. Like, is it hard for people in general to recognize burnouts in introverts because introverts are already quiet and not as social? But I will take both answers. But I think that's the question.
What I will say is, I'm going to say it depends on the person, because it's not burnout isn't about necessarily being quiet or not as social. And also there is definite overlaps with depression there. So there's so many Venn diagrams to where this could go. And The burnout is the energy levels, or not having the energy to do X, Y, and Z, and pushing yourself regardless. And I could see how mistaking an introvert's low energy because they haven't had the time to socially recharge could be mistaken and or be burnout. A lot of people find it hard to. You should, because everyone is different, and because everyone has different levels of what burnout or anything looks like to them. Asking questions and being curious is better than assuming in any situation. Ask.
Yeah.
And it could be they're just having a bad day, or something is going on in their personal life that you just don't know about, that could show up in a certain way. So I would say, I don't know if it's necessarily harder. I don't think people make assumptions about what burnout looks like in other humans, and it's all different. It all depends. There is some through lines, but my burnout looks very different from like my partner's burnout, for example. They're just different. It's probably not the answer you wanted, but that's the crux of it. Is we're also individual, that people might assume that you are burnt out. Let's be honest, everyone assumes we just don't like people and we're just being antisocial, and you're an introvert, so that's what it is.
Crazy. It's crazy.
But
Oh my God.
very rarely I do think that someone's going to be like, oh, you're an introvert, oh, you must be burnt out. Like I don't hear that come about. But I live and learn. We'll find out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would answer that question. I agree with everything that Janet said. I think I would add that if you are the type of person that is a quiet introvert, then that means that if you're a person that is a quiet introvert, then what that means is that it might be easier for people to mistake or make the assumption that you could be burning out, frankly, but you are not talking about it, or you're not verbalizing some things that might be cues to people. And so that's the way that I could see that it might be harder for people to recognize burnout in introverts if you're a quieter introverts. But the truth is, we have quiet introverts, we have very verbal introverts, we have, we as introverted people we run the spectrum in of ourselves, right? So but I do think that if you are on the quieter side, then it is easier for people to probably see potential signs in you, but also ignore them. Right? Just like you yourself might be ignoring them as well. So I think it's an interesting question, Olivia, for sure. Okay. Any final words of wisdom? Or anything that we haven't talked about that you think is really important that you want to say on the topic before we wrap.
Anything you want to say on the topic? Now that focus.
We stayed on topic, so I'm very proud of both of us. We have stayed on topic, so I'm not suggesting that we aren't or we haven't. I'm just.
What I will say is, if you get the chance, look up what the 12 stages of burnout are, and just see if you recognize yourself in those 12 stages. I have it on a website somewhere, but you can really just Google. Like, I don't want to say like you have to come to my website. No, it is on there, the 12 stages of burnout, and just see if you recognize yourself on there, and if you recognize yourself on there for long periods of time. Reach out, talk about it, ask for help. You're not going to be the only one. It looks different to everybody, but the more that you know yourself and the more you can figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you, the more success you will have in life, in your business, in your personal life, in a career, because no one's going to know you like you, and using that to your advantage and figuring out what works and how to make it work. And there's a word that I want to use, to navigate anything that comes at you, is going to be key. And we're all going to experience burnout at some stage in our lives. I'm not saying that everything you do, you will never experience burnout. Even people who are rich and famous experience burnout. It is not, it doesn't discriminate. It's just recognize. The earlier you can recognize and the quicker you get at recognizing the signs, the quicker that you can put things in place, and the quicker that you can to help mitigate that. But I just say that, yes, final thought is, if you take nothing away from today, go and look at your calendar and put in an hour somewhere next week where you do something that restores your energy.
Love it. Can I do? I'm sure I can get that done.
Yes, you
Yes.
can. It was not a can you do that? That wasn't like a.
I'm actually thinking. Hopefully I will be on an island somewhere next week. So yeah, I can definitely do that.
Thank you.
I
I'll hold
think.
you accountable.
Oh, please do. I need it. Please do. Please do. I would say for me, my final thought is it's very similar to what Janice was saying. So if you, for example, are thinking that you are suspecting that you might be addicted to work, um, then I would strongly encourage you to reach out. Like I would love to. This is being work addict. Work addiction is not something that I talk about often publicly, not because I'm ashamed. I'm actually. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a proud of being work addicted, but I take it very seriously because of my personal journey and because of my clinical background in helping women, women and men, frankly, deal with work addiction. But if that is something that you suspect, like, you know what, I'm not really able to control how much I work, how often I work, how hard I go on, all of these projects and things. I want to stop. I know I should probably stop, but I need to work and I don't know how I can actually do both, right?
What's
Like,
that look like?
it's right. You don't feel like you have control over that. The first thing I would say is you're not alone. There are many of us in this world who have either experienced that at one point or are experiencing it now. And then the second thing I will say is very similar to Janice, that you don't have to navigate it by yourself. And frankly, you shouldn't, right? Being addicted to work is a true issue. It's a mental health issue, it's a physical health issue, it's an issue. But the good news is that we now know how to deal with it. So if this is you or you suspect that it's you, feel free to reach out and I will be happy to put you in contact with resources that can help you for sure. Okay. Those were our final words. We both want to thank you for joining us this evening. It's like we said, very closely, very quickly coming up is the end of the year. We hope that you are already thinking about and planning downtime for yourself, like Janice said, and that you're full of hope for what the new year is actually going to bring, both personally and professionally. And with that, anything else you want to say, Janice, before we sign
No.
off?
I mean, I took a nap before this, if that helps. But yes,
No.
that was my downtime.
She came with mad energy. I was like, look, girl, I'm trying to wake up. She's like, I took a nap, so I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
Well, also, I'm a night person, so I'm like, this is my
Are
sweet
you?
spot.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're at your peak right now. Whereas I'm like, oh, I'm about to get on the bed. I done talk for an hour. I'm about to lay down for 50 minutes just to recuperate. Okay, that's the introvert in me. Okay, all right,
Thanks,
guys. Thank you
everyone.
so much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you. Oh, wait, sorry, Janice. Where can they find you?
Thecareerintrovert.com. Anywhere on the internet, Janice Chaka. I'm there. You got it.
Perfect. Okay. And for me, I'm at thechangedoc.com and on LinkedIn. That's my social media platform of choice. Okay. Have a great one. Thank you for joining us. Until next time. Bye. Okay.